In today's lesson, we are back on page, what is this? 68. Okay, so we're back on page 68, and yesterday we learned how to do graphing and taking the square root. Today our focus is on factoring. So if we talk about factoring, this should come to mind, your factoring flow chart. First thing you're going to look for is every time is, do I have a greatest common factor? If the answer is yes, you factor that out. And if it's no, you go straight to here. How many terms do you have? If you have just two terms, you're going to check for, is it a difference of two squares? If it's not, it's okay. It's already factored. All right. If there's three terms, here's where you get a lot more options, a lot more work shows up here. If A, the number in front, is 1, all you do is ask yourself, what two numbers do I multiply, get the last, add to get the middle term? If the A value is something other than 1, and it's not a greatest common factor, because you would have already taken that out, that's when you're going to do slide, divide, and bottoms up. Now, when we are factoring, we are actually still looking for your x-intercepts, just like when you're graphing, okay? So I want you to open to factoring. So when you open up for factoring, you're going to see the steps, okay? The first step is to set the equation equal to 0. When I say set the equation equal to 0, that means get everything on one side so that it's equal to 0. So I want you to write this. Get everything on one side. Because if you don't get all of the terms on one side and in standard form, factoring's not going to work because you're not going to be looking at what you need. Now, step number 2 is you're going to factor completely with the parentheses, just like we have done for weeks now. Then you're going to set each factor equal to 0 and solve for x. And you could check your solution by plugging it into the original. Now, numbers 4 and 5, that's f of x equals x squared plus 5x plus 6. There's nothing to get equal to 0. Everything's together. When I say get everything on one side, I'm talking about stuff like this. I got a 15 that would need to move, okay? So I'm going to use my inverses. Starting with 4, we're going to set this equal to 0. We are literally going to say 0 equals x squared plus 5x plus 6. Think about that factoring flow chart. What is the first thing we always look for? GCF, greatest common factor. Do I have a greatest common factor here? Okay. So, because 1, 5, and 6 won't divide. So I don't have one. That's fine. So I see that I have 3 terms. My A value is 1. So I don't slide, divide, and bottoms up. I simply ask myself, what two numbers multiply, now don't tell me the numbers yet, multiply to get me 6 and add up to get 5. So I'm going to pretend like I don't see it immediately. I know that x squared is going to break down into x and x. Now, to multiply to get 6, I could do 1 and 6 or 2 and 3. Since both of these are positive, do I even need to worry about negatives? No, there are no negatives. Nothing's negative. What is 1 plus 6?
7.
That ain't 5. What's 2 plus 3?
5, that's it.
That's it. That's my numbers. Plus 2 plus 3. Now, we have successfully completed steps 1 and 2. When you're told to solve, you're looking for an answer of x equals. I don't have x equals. Now, I'm going to take x plus 2 and make it equal 0, because see, this equals 0 and this equals 0. I'm going to solve for x. How do I get rid of plus 2? I'm on minus 2 on both sides. So x equals negative 2. What would I add to 3 to get 0? Negative 3. I'm going to subtract 3 to both sides. X equals negative 3. both of these are my solutions. So these are my answers. Now, I just solved some algebra. Where would those two numbers show up on my graph?
On the x-axis.
On the x-axis, those are my x-intercepts. I want to show you that, okay? So I'm going to take my phone, and I'm going to take this app I have on here. It's a graphing calculator app. It's called Desmos. And I'm going to zoom out for a second. I am going to type in this function right here. So I got x squared plus 5x plus 6. Okay? Now, that's the same function, right? Zoom in. There's -2. There is -3. Those are my x-intercepts. So every time you solve, you're getting the x-intercepts. All right? Now, if you look at this, what form is that when I get it factored?
It is
That's,
vertex.
nope,
No.
intercept form. That's why that's your two intercepts. If it's in the parentheses, if you want to avoid this right here, if it's in the parentheses, what do you know about it when we snatch it out? It's going to be the opposite. So opposite is -2, opposite is -3. Okay? Let's look at this guy. Now, we're going to solve by factoring. First thing we got to do is make sure everything's equal to 0. Well, g of x is really nothing more than a y. Now, factor. That's what we're doing today, is we're solving by factoring. Do you have a greatest common factor? No. Okay. Thinking about your flow chart, how many terms is this? And on that flow chart it says, is this a difference of two perfect squares? It is. So you're going to write 0 equals. When you have a difference of two squares, you have two parentheses. What do you know about those? One's going to be a plus and one's going to be a minus. What times itself gives you x squared? What times itself gives you -4? 2 times 2. Now, if I want you to solve these, okay, you could write them down and solve. Now, you say, Miss Slusher, if I know that this is vertex form and I just pull out the opposite number, can I do that? Yes. The only time that you won't be able to look at it and just pull out the number is if we do like a slide divide bottoms up situation. Like if I had 3x plus 2, then you'd have to solve. Now, if I want to solve for x, what is the inverse of plus 2? Minus 2. So x equals -2. Okay? All right, because I'm trying to figure out what would I put for x, add 2, and then equal 0. I'm using my inverses.
I thought you were like 0 take away -2.
Yeah, 0 take away 2. 0 minus 2 is -2. You don't take away a negative. You just do minus. And then here, if I've got x minus 2, what's the inverse of subtract 2? Plus 2. So then what is my answer? Positive 2. You could write your answer like this. Yesterday we learned a fancier way to write that. That's a positive 2 and a negative 2, so how else can we write it? Plus or minus 2. Here we go. All right, so let's look at number 6. Now, number 6, 7, and 8 are a little bit different from 4 and 5. 4 and 5 are given to you as a quadratic function, meaning you've got something that represents the y and the x. These are just equations. How do I know that these are quadratic equations? What's it got to have to be quadratic? It's got to have x squared, okay? Because they have x squared as the highest term. Now there's an x, but x squared is a higher term. That means they're quadratic. So when it's quadratic, I have a lot of different methods I could use, and today we're learning factoring. Now, the first thing you got to do to factor is you got to get everything equal to 0. I can't factor because 15's not over there. That's going to make a huge difference. So 15 is the only thing not where it's supposed to be. How are we going to move positive 15? We're going to inverse, which is subtract. Okay? Why did I put it right up under the 20? You're going to combine like terms. So I'm going to go ahead and write them there. Now, 15 minus 15 is 0. I'm solving quadratic equations. What does an equation have to have? Equal sign. If you lose the equal, technically you're not looking at an equation anymore. So then I'm going to add like terms. I've got x squared plus 2x. What is negative 20 and negative 15?
35.
Negative 35. Now, what method are we looking at today? Solving by factoring. I need to factor that quadratic, x squared plus 2x minus 35. So I start with my factoring flowchart. I keep looking at this, okay? It's over there on the board. I have it right beside me. You have a copy of it. First thing I look for is, do I have a greatest common factor? One, but it don't do anything, so we don't even consider one. So there's no greatest common factor. So my next step is, how many terms do I have? 3. The next question is A equal to 1? Yes. So do I need to slide dividing bottoms up? No, because you'd just be sliding and multiplying and dividing by a 1. That's just wasting your time. All right? So you ask yourself, what two numbers multiply to give me negative 35? Now don't tell me. And add to give me 2. So, if I'm trying to figure out those two numbers, some of you recognize it immediately, some of us don't. So for the benefit of us that don't, we're going to do all the work. I got to figure out how I multiply to get 35. Now somebody remind me, because sometimes I deal with bigger numbers. 35 I'm okay on. What trick did we learn about making the calculator do this for us? We do table. I erase whatever's in there. If I want to know the factors of 35, what do I type? 35 divided by x. X is going to change, and I'm not going to worry about negatives because I'm not worried about negatives. I'm going to handle the negatives. So I've got 1 and 35. I don't write down any of these fractions. I've got 5 and 7, and by then it starts to repeat. So all I've got is 1 and 35 and 5 and 7. Now, if I'm going to multiply two numbers and it be a negative answer, one's positive and one is negative. Now, I got one of each. When I add these two numbers, I end up with extra positives. That means the big number has to be positive, so the only option is for the little number to be negative. So now I'm going to add these up, and whichever one adds to be 2, that's my answer. What is 35 minus 1? 34. That's not 2. What is 7 minus 5?
2.
So I'm going to break x squared into two parentheses. X squared breaks into x, and x, you have a minus 5 and a positive 7. Now, because the only thing you've got with x is 1x, you can take the shortcut. This is intercept form. What's your intercepts? Positive 5 and negative 7. Why'd you do the opposites? You're supposed to take the opposite. Here's why I taught you that shortcut. This x minus 7 equals to 0, and this x plus 7 equals to 0. Remember when we kept saying if it's in the parentheses, you take the opposite? That's because you've got to have the opposite to make it equal 0. You got to have the opposite to make it equal 0. Now, if you recognize that's intercept form and you know you take the opposite, can you take that shortcut? Absolutely. You know that. This is just why it works. You could write this as negative, nope, not negative 5 because that's not the right answer, as 5 comma negative 7. In fact, if you have to type it into Edulastic, that's how I tell you to type it. What can you not do with those two numbers? You can't put them in parentheses. Why? Because it's not one point. These are two individual, what part of the graph? X's, your x-intercepts. Okay? So if you, with this, if you were naming the point of the x-intercept, you would put 5 comma 0. But we're not really naming the point, we're solving. So all we care about is what x equals. Because if I take x and I plug it back in, so let me show you how to check your work. All right, I go back to the original. What is 1x I think I have? I think I have 5. If I do 5 squared plus 2 times 5 minus 20, if I get 15, yes, all right, so we were trying to check this. So I'm plugging in what we think our answer is. So if I plug this in, if it equals 15, it's the right answer. What does it equal? 15, it's the right answer. Let me check negative 7. I'm going to do parentheses negative 7 squared plus 2 times negative 7 minus 20. Except for Miss Lusher like totally goofed that up and didn't hit the rest of her buttons. I get 15, that's right. Now, I'm going to type in a wrong answer. Let's say somebody thinks 3 is the answer. How are they going to know that 3 is not the answer? It's not going to equal 15. See how it doesn't equal 15? Now, 3 negative 5 is a point on the graph, but it is not the x-intercept, therefore it's not the answer. Now, I want us to bypass number 7 for a second. I want to do number 8. I want to make sure everything's on one side. Is everything on one side? Yes, everything's on one side equal to 0. So what should you check for now? Greatest common factor. Do you have a greatest common factor?
No.
Thank goodness, I ain't got to worry about that, right? So I'm going to ask myself the question. What two numbers multiply to give me negative 17 and add to give me 16? So, to get 17, I know I can do 1 and 17. What else? Type it in the table. Let's check, okay? So I'm going to go to the table. I'm going to type 17 divided by x. Oh, I want to start at 1. All right. I see 1 and 17. I wrote that down. 2 is a decimal. 3 and a decimal.
That's the only one.
That's the only one. So all these decimals, because by the time I get all these decimals and I get back to 17, it's 17 and 1. That's the only one because 17 is a prime number.
One's gonna be negative.
1 is going to be negative, 1 positive. Why?
Because that'll get you positive 16.
All right. So it's going to multiply to get you a negative 16, and then you have to add to get the negative 17, and you add to get positive 16. So we've got one of each. The big number has to be positive. So that means this is negative because 17 minus 1 is 16. So you're going to have 2 parentheses. X squared is going to break into x and x. X minus 1, x plus 17. Now, a lot of people are going to stop right there and be like, I did it, Miss Lusher, I'm done. You're not done solving. When I told you to solve linear equations, it always worked down to be x equals number. If you are told to solve anything, it's got to be x equals number. So how do I get my x's right here? I do my opposite. This is my intercepts. I'm going to pull this out of the parentheses, and negative 1 becomes positive 1, and positive 17 becomes negative 17. I can write them with an and between, I can write them with a comma, but I cannot put parentheses around them. Now, I saved number 7. Why do you think I saved number 7 to do last? It's a little harder, okay? Now, for the first time in number 7, I see a number in front of my x squared term, at least the first time today. So that means I got to watch out. There might be a GCF or it might be slide divide, it might be both. So the first thing I got to do is realize I need everything together and in standard form. Which one of those terms is in the wrong place? 15x. It needs to be over here. How do I move positive 15x? I'm going to subtract that 15x. Now tell me this. Where does it go? Front, the back, the middle?
Like 9.
An x needs to go x squared, x, then number. Okay? To be standard form, we've got to list our x squared, then our x, then our constant, and on this side is 0, which we needed to happen. Now, consider the numbers 6, 15, and 9. My first thought is 6 my greatest common factor? No. Why not? Why won't 6 work?
Because
You can't divide 15 and 9. But what do all of them divide by? 3. So we do have a greatest common factor of 3. Now, when we have that greatest common factor, it writes out front, and you got to get the rest of the stuff. You're going to divide each of these by 3 in your head and write it down. What is 6 divided by 3? 2x squared. What is negative 15 divided by 3? Negative 5x. You're right. What's negative 3? Positive 9 divided by 3? Positive 3. Now, I'm not done, because I'm not done until I get x equals number. What am I going to do with this 3 every step of the way? I just bring it down. All right. So, this is 3 terms. That is not 1. When it's not 1, what have I got to do? Slide, divide, bottoms up. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and just write, if it's all right with you, I'm just going to write my 3 down here, where I'm going to put my last answer. That way I don't have to, I'm just going to do this. Bring down the GCF. So I'm going to write that right there. Bring down GCF. Because that is the most common mistake I've seen on our worksheets and our quiz. We're not bringing down that GCF. All right. So what am I going to slide?
2 to 3.
All right. 2 slides and multiplies to 3 to give us x squared minus 5x plus 6. Now, I did slide. I got to factor this thing. So I'm going to ask myself what 2 numbers multiply to give me a positive 6 and add to give me a negative 5. Now, don't tell me my numbers. Let's think it out. 6 could be 1 and 6 or 2 and 3. If I'm going to multiply 2 numbers and get a positive, they got to either both be positive or both be negative.
Both be negative
Why?
because there's a negative 5.
Because you got to add to be negative 5. You're right. Now, what is negative 1 plus a negative 6? Not 5. What is negative 2 plus negative 3?
Negative 5.
All right. So you've got your x and your x, your negative 2, your negative 3. I saw a lot of people stop there over the last few days. We did slide and we factored. So what do I need to do? I'm going to divide and then bottoms up. Now, I also see people just bottoms up here. You've got to divide. Because see, 2 divided by 2 is 1. And then, does 3 divide by 2 to simplify any? No. So I did divide. So what's left for me to do? Bottoms up. That guy don't have a bottom to go up. This guy does. 2x minus 3. Now, that's what equals 0. Okay? I'm going to show you all of the algebra. And then I want you to see if you could pick out a shortcut. Okay? So, these are called factors because they're multiplied together. Each one you would set equal to 0. I would say 3 equals 0. I would say x minus 1 equals 0. And I would say 2x minus 3 equals 0. Now, does 3 equal 0? No. He don't matter. He don't even matter right now. Now, when we're factoring, yes, he matters. As far as getting the answer, it doesn't matter because it doesn't have an x. That is not going to get me an answer. So if I need to get this x, how do I get rid of minus 1? Add 1 to both sides. So x equals 1. All right. I need to get this x. What am I going to get rid of first? Add 3 to both sides. You get 2x equals 3. What you going to do now? Divide by 2. X equals 3 over 2. So these are my 2 answers, right? I want you to, oop, that was really bad there. I want you to see if you see a shortcut.
It was just positive, like, you just put them in the intercept form.
When you see it in intercept form, before you bottoms up, could you have gone, oh, there's my answers, bam.
Yeah.
Before, when you're solving by factoring, before you bottoms up, you've got that joker in intercept form. You can just pick them out. Boom. Okay? Now, you can always write out every step. But once you understand that when you set it equal to 0, you're making it the opposite, that's what you've been doing for the last week anyways. You could say, I'm making this the opposite. I'm making these the opposite. I don't have to write out everything because I understand that's what I'm doing. Okay? So this is solving by factoring. Now, solving by factoring only works if you can factor. All right? So there's another method that I'm going to teach you tomorrow that would work for anything. But for today's focus, we're going to focus on solving by factoring.